In foreign ministries and intelligence agencies on either side of the Atlantic, counter-terrorism officials are increasingly asking themselves the same question. Is the Arab Spring good or bad for terrorism? 6 months down the line, it is a mixed picture, as our security correspondent Frank Gardner reports.
The sound of chaos in a country's capital. This was Sana'a this month, as tribal gunmen fought the army for control. With the president out of the country, there's now a truce of sorts. But in the south of Yemen, Al-Qaeda and its allies are trying to seize towns from a government weakened by months of protests and defections. Yemen's ambassador to London, Abdullah Radi, tells me they pose a growing threat.
Al-Qaeda, they take that advantage from the recent situation in Yemen. And of course, I cannot say that we are facing an easy enemy. They are becoming strong and stronger.
Britain is now on standby to evacuate its citizens from Yemen if the situation deteriorates further. The man in the hot seat there is the ambassador, John Wilkes. We spoke to him by phone.
The problem, of course, in Yemen particularly, but it could be true in other Arab countries at this time, is that the transition processes that are starting could lead to instability and the opportunities for Al-Qaeda and other extremist groups to take advantage. But overall, I think it's pretty clear that what is happening in the Arab Spring is actually a rejection of the ideology and values that Al-Qaeda attempts to propagate.
That may be true, but it won't stop jihadists from trying to exploit the confusion. Over in Libya, opponents of Colonel Gaddafi's regime are believed to include elements close to Al-Qaeda. A large number of Libyans went to wage jihad in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's possible that some hardened Islamists will end up in a post-Gaddafi government. Meanwhile, Al-Qaeda in the Sahara has been looking to rearm itself from plundered Libyan weapon stocks. In Egypt, the euphoria that greeted the departure of President Mubarak in February has long since evaporated. The collapse of his hated security apparatus has been accompanied by a rise in religious extremism.
Clearly, the Copts in particular in Egypt are beginning to feel that that may be the shape of the future for them also. That's where a great deal of the anxiety in Egypt is coming from.
The Archbishop of Canterbury last week concerned over recent attacks on Egyptian Christians and their churches. Al-Qaeda doesn't yet have much of a presence in Egypt, but if it can stir up sectarian hatred, it will. And Western governments, which publicly welcomed the Arab Spring, are now having to rebuild their security links with the Middle East that's on the move. I'm now outside the London headquarters of Britain's MI6, the Secret Intelligence Service. It's that curious green glass and cream-coloured building on the banks of the Thames. Just like the CIA, they didn't see the Arab Spring coming, at least not in the way it did. But to be fair, nor did most of us in the media. Now that it's happened, one wonders where it leaves their whole network of Arab security and intelligence relationships carefully built up over time. And are they now suffering from a backlash against Western links with all those despotic regimes?
I think the West's relationship with autocrats like President Saleh in Yemen and indeed President Mubarak in Egypt made a massive contribution to international terrorism.
Nabila Ramdani from the London School of Economics.
And the deceit was that either you have your dictators and relative stability, or else you have Al-Qaeda and global jihad. And the idea was that those dictators were working hand in hand with the Americans to bring about peace, stability, and to fight the so-called war on terror. But this narrative was, of course, false.
6 months on, the Arab Spring is still very much a work in progress. Relationships between countries are being recalibrated, and there are certainly risks in the short term of increased violence. But democracy, when it eventually comes, is likely to be the most effective antidote yet to the scourge of terrorism in the Middle East.
That was Frank Gardner reporting.